When my son told me, "Don't embarrass us, Mom," I swallowed my pride and stayed quiet. They thought I was just the meek old woman living in their spare room, grateful for every crumb of kindness. But the day they tried to push me out of the house, I smiled, pulled out one letter from my lawyer, and watched the color drain from their faces. When my husband passed away 8 years ago, I thought I'd gotten used to living quietly. At 64, my days were calm, predictable. I woke up in my little house every morning to the smell of coffee, watered my small garden, and read books in the afternoon. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A life I'd built piece by piece after decades of teaching elementary school and raising my only son, David. I had enough from my pension and the life insurance payout to keep myself comfortable, though never extravagant. David would visit sometimes, bringing my grandson Ethan along. Those visits were the brightest parts of my week. Ethan's laugh reminded me of when David was small, when the world seemed less complicated, when love was simple. But as David's career grew, the visits became less frequent. I told myself it was normal. People got busy. Children grew into their own lives. Then, one evening, David called. His voice was warm, but there was a rehearsed edge to it. "Mom," he said, "Mary and I were talking. We'd love for you to come live with us. It'll be easier for us to make sure you're okay. Plus, Ethan will love having you around more." It sounded like a blessing. I'd been feeling the weight of the quiet lately. Living closer to my grandson seemed like a gift. "Are you sure?" I asked, hesitant. "I don't want to be in the way." "Of course not," he said quickly. "Your family. It'll be good for all of us." 2 weeks later, I packed my essentials, clothes, photo albums, a few books, and moved into David's large suburban home. I didn't bring much. I didn't want to disrupt their space. Mary greeted me at the door with a polite hug. Her smile was flawless, the kind that could pass for warmth at a glance but held no real heat. "We've set you up in the guest room," she said. "It's cozy." The guest room was small, tucked away at the far end of the hallway near the laundry. A single window faced a side fence. It wasn't the sunlit space I'd imagined, but I told myself it was fine. I was here for family, not comfort. At first, everything seemed lovely. Dinners together, stories at the table, Ethan running into my arms after school. The house felt alive, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I cooked occasionally, simple meals, careful not to step on Mary's toes. She liked her kitchen organized, and I respected that. But small things began to catch my attention. One night, after I'd prepared a pie for dessert, Mary said gently, "Mom, thank you, but we usually keep the kitchen closed after 8 p.m. It helps keep things organized." I laughed it off, assuming it was just her way of maintaining order. A week later, I noticed David hesitating when I offered to host my old friend Linda for tea. "Maybe it's better if you meet her somewhere else," he suggested. "We don't want to overcrowd the house." It was strange, but I told myself I was imagining things. After all, they'd opened their home to me. Still, I couldn't ignore the shift in David. My son, once talkative, always confiding in me, now kept conversations shallow. I'd ask about work, and he'd respond with a quick, "Busy as always, Mom," before disappearing into his office. He seemed tired, distant, as though my presence was a burden he didn't want to voice. The turning point came during a family barbecue. Some of David's colleagues were over, along with neighbors. I made a lighthearted comment about David's childhood, how he once got stuck in a tree rescuing a cat, and everyone laughed. Later, while I was clearing plates, David pulled me aside. His tone was polite, but the words stung. "Mom, maybe don't share those stories. It can be embarrassing." I froze. "Embarrassing? It's just a childhood memory." "I know," he said quickly, glancing toward Mary. "Just let's keep things simple, okay? Don't embarrass us." The words stayed with me long after the guests left. That night, alone in my small room, I turned the words over in my head. Don't embarrass us. It wasn't anger that I felt. It was something heavier. A quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't here because they wanted me close. I was here because it was convenient for them. I thought about the way Mary subtly controlled the kitchen, the way David avoided deeper talks, the way my room felt like a storage space more than a home. The warmth I'd felt at first began to cool. And yet, I pushed the thought aside. I had raised David. I had been there for every scraped knee, every school project, every heartbreak. Surely I wasn't just a guest in their lives now. Surely I still mattered. But late that night, as I lay in bed, I heard faint voices down the hall. Mary's voice calm but firm. She needs to remember this isn't her house. We have to set boundaries. David's voice quieter, hesitant. I know, but she's my mom. My heart sank. I didn't say anything the next morning. I smiled at breakfast, asked Ethan about school, and went about my day as if nothing was wrong. But deep down, a shift had started, and I had a feeling this was only the beginning. My 65th birthday came on a quiet Tuesday. I didn't expect a grand party, just a warm dinner, maybe a small cake with Ethan. I woke up early that morning, humming as I made my coffee, telling myself that no matter how simple it was, birthdays were about being with family. By mid-morning, the house was unusually busy. Mary was in the kitchen arranging platters of expensive appetizers. David was in and out of the living room, moving chairs, adjusting the dining table. "Oh," I said with a smile. "You didn't tell me we were having company." Mary glanced at me briefly. "It's just a little get-together," she said, her tone polite but distant. "A few friends of mine are coming over this evening." Something in my chest sank. Not a word about my birthday, not a single card on the counter. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they had a surprise planned later. Still, a part of me couldn't let the day pass quietly. I decided to make a cake. A simple vanilla sponge with strawberries, the same one David always loved as a boy. As I whisked the batter, memories flooded in. Late nights baking cookies for his school bake sales, early mornings packing his lunches. By late afternoon, the cake was cooling on the counter, the sweet smell filling the kitchen. But when I came back from my room, the cake was gone. I found it pushed to the far end of the counter, covered with a foil sheet. Mary was arranging an elaborate 3-tiered cake decorated with gold accents. "Oh," I murmured. "I thought we could have this one too." Mary gave a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks, Margaret, but tonight's menu is already set. We don't want to overcrowd the table." As guests began to arrive, I realized none of them were family. They were all Mary's friends, people I'd never met. I hovered by the doorway, unsure if I should join. From across the room, I caught Mary leaning toward David, her voice low but sharp. "Better if she stays out of sight. It'll keep things smoother." David's eyes flicked toward me. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Instead, he nodded, a tight, silent agreement. I retreated to my room quietly, my heart heavy. That night, I sat alone at my small desk, a slice of my untouched cake on a plate. I could hear laughter and music from the other side of the wall. I thought about all the birthdays I'd planned for David when he was a boy. I remembered the year he wanted a pirate cake, and I stayed up past midnight sculpting tiny fondant ships. I remembered the look on his face when I surprised him with a basketball hoop at 14, saving for months to afford it. I'd never missed a birthday, not once. Now, sitting in the quiet of my small room, it struck me how invisible I'd become. After the party ended, I went into the kitchen to clean up. The gold cake was almost gone, the counter messy with crumbs and empty glasses. I quietly wrapped the leftover appetizers, washed dishes, and wiped down the counters. No one thanked me, and I didn't expect them to. When I returned to my room, there was a soft knock at my door. It was Ethan. "Grandma, why didn't you come to the party?" I smiled faintly. "I was busy, sweetheart. Did you have fun?" He nodded. "Yeah, but I like your cake better." My chest ached. The next morning, as I stepped out to collect the mail, I ran into Mr. Paul, my elderly neighbor from across the street. He leaned on his cane, his sharp eyes studying me. "Morning, Margaret," he said, his tone careful. "I saw a lot of people over last night." "Yes," I replied lightly. "Mary had some friends over." He nodded slowly, then lowered his voice. "I've been hearing some talk. You should be careful. I think they've been discussing changes to the house." I frowned. "Changes?" He tapped his cane. "Just keep your ears open." I forced a smile, thanked him, and walked back inside. But his words stuck with me. That evening, David barely spoke to me. Mary chatted about her plans for the upcoming week, her tone perfectly pleasant, as though the night before hadn't happened. I smiled at the table, nodding in all the right places. But beneath the calm surface, something inside me had shifted, and for the first time, I began to wonder if moving in had been a mistake. I wasn't looking for trouble that Tuesday afternoon. I just finished folding a load of laundry and was heading down the hallway when I heard voices coming from David's office. The door was half closed, and I could hear Mary's voice, low but urgent. "We can't keep waiting, David. The market's right. If we sell now, we can move before the summer. But she's still here." I froze. David's voice followed, quieter. "She's my mom. It's not that simple." Mary sighed. "We'll help her find someplace. A retirement apartment, maybe. But this house, this is our home. We need to move forward." I felt my grip tighten on the laundry basket. Move? Without me? Their voices lowered again, and I heard Mary say, "Once her name is off the paperwork, it'll be easier." I stood there, my heart pounding. Name off the paperwork? I backed away quietly, my mind racing. That night, alone in my room, I thought back to the day David bought the house. He'd been 30 then, newly married, not yet stable in his career. The down payment had been a stretch for him and Mary. "Mom," he had said, "it's just until we can refinance. The bank prefers joint signatures, and with Dad's life insurance money, we can make this work." It hadn't been a loan, it had been my contribution, a gift to help my son start his life. And yes, my name had gone on the paperwork, but I never thought of it as a claim. It was simply security. But now, Mary's words echoed in my head. "Once her name is off the paperwork." The next morning, while they were out, I went to the closet where I kept my personal files. I dug out the worn manila folder marked House. Inside were insurance statements, bank transfers, and, my breath caught, the original purchase documents. And there it was, my name, on the title. For a moment, relief washed over me. They couldn't just erase me from this house. My name was right there, but a sliver of doubt crept in. Mary was smart, organized. If she said she wanted my name off the paperwork, she must have a plan. That evening at dinner, I studied them both carefully. Mary laughed easily, asking Ethan about school. David spoke in short answers. There was no sign of tension, no hint of the conversation I'd overheard. But beneath the calm surface, I could feel something moving. 2 days later, when they were both out again, I searched for any new paperwork. I didn't want to snoop, but my gut told me I needed to know. In David's home office, I found a locked drawer. I didn't have the key, but tucked in the corner of the desk was an envelope marked with my name. Inside was a copy of a legal form I'd never seen before, one that looked like it removed my name from the house title. My signature was at the bottom. Only it wasn't my signature. I stared at the paper, my stomach twisting. The signature was close enough that someone who didn't know better might believe it. But I knew every curve of my own handwriting, and this wasn't mine. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Mary hadn't just planned to remove my name. She'd already taken steps to do it. I returned the papers exactly where I'd found them and retreated to my room, my mind spinning. If this document had been submitted somewhere official, it might already be in motion. I thought about going straight to David, demanding an explanation, but the memory of his silence during so many small slights stopped me. If he'd been willing to speak up, he would have already. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing my signature, false, tilted at the wrong angle, on a document meant to erase me. The next morning, over coffee, Mary breezed into the kitchen, humming. "Oh, Margaret, could you keep an eye on Ethan this afternoon? I have some errands to run." Her smile was flawless, her voice perfectly pleasant. I nodded, hiding the storm brewing inside me. Alone later, I sat in my room staring at the old purchase documents. My name was there in black ink, legally binding. But if Mary was forging signatures, she was playing a game I didn't fully understand yet. I realized I couldn't fight this with confrontation alone. I needed someone who understood the law, someone who could untangle whatever Mary was trying to do. But in that moment, the weight of betrayal sank deep. It wasn't just the paperwork, it was every "Mom, don't embarrass us," every polite smile, every quiet boundary that had been set to keep me at arm's length. This wasn't my home, not really, not to them, and if I didn't protect myself, I might lose the last piece of stability I had. I sat at my desk for hours staring at the forged signature, my heart thudding against my ribs. My name, my identity, had been stolen on paper. Alone, I could do nothing, but I knew one person who might help. Attorney Harris. He'd handled my husband's estate years ago. Back then, he'd been thorough, patient, even kind. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but if anyone could tell me whether I still had a claim to this house, it would be him. I called his office the next morning. His secretary recognized my name instantly and fit me in for an afternoon appointment. Walking into his office was like stepping back in time. The same dark wooden bookshelves, the same framed certificates, the same faint scent of old paper. Harris himself looked older, hair whiter, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Margaret," he said warmly, shaking my hand, "it's been a long time. What brings you in?" I pulled the forged document from my bag and set it on his desk. "This," I said quietly. He scanned the paper, his brow furrowing. "You didn't sign this?" "No," I said firmly. "And yet, here it is, with my name on it." He set the paper down, his expression darkening. "This is a problem," he said, "but it's also sloppy. This signature is clearly inconsistent with your original documents, and you're still listed as co-owner on the original title, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, sliding the original purchase agreement toward him. He studied it, then looked up at me. "Margaret, you are still legally tied to this property. They can't remove you without your consent." Relief flickered through me, but Harris wasn't done. "And there's something else you should know," he said, leaning back. "Your husband left you that insurance payout specifically as security. He wanted you to have a lasting stake. I know because he told me himself when we set it up. This house was never meant to be theirs alone." The words hit me harder than I expected. My husband's foresight, his quiet way of protecting me, even years after his death. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. But Harris wasn't smiling. "Margaret, I need to be honest with you. Forging a signature is fraud. If this document has been sent anywhere official, we're looking at a very serious matter." I swallowed hard. "What should I do?" "Nothing," he said simply. "Not yet. You say nothing, you sign nothing, and you act as if you know nothing. Let them keep moving forward. The more rope they give themselves, the easier it will be to tighten it later." His tone was calm, almost casual, but I could feel the weight of his strategy. 2 days later, Harris called me. "I did some digging," he said. "That forged document, it's already been sent to the bank. They're preparing preliminary paperwork for a sale." The room tilted slightly around me. "They're selling the house?" "That's the plan," Harris said. "But they can't close anything without your legitimate signature, which means they're going to hit a wall, and we're going to be there when it happens." It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a game of timing. Harris outlined the plan. We'd gather evidence, copies of the forged documents, bank communications, anything that tied Mary and David to the attempt. Meanwhile, I'd stay exactly where I was, acting as if nothing had changed. It wasn't easy. Every meal at that table felt like walking a tightrope. Mary chatted about weekend plans. David discussed work. I smiled when appropriate, nodded at all the right times, and kept my voice light. Inside, my thoughts were sharp, deliberate. I was watching every detail now. What mail came in, who called, how often David disappeared into his office. Harris and I spoke in short, discreet calls. He prepared a formal legal statement asserting my ownership. He drafted letters to the bank, timed carefully to be delivered the moment Mary and David made their move. At night, alone in my small room, I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind. I imagined their faces when Harris's letter arrived. I imagined Mary's perfect composure cracking, David's silence turning to shock. I wasn't just waiting for them to fall into their own trap. I was preparing for the moment I would no longer be the quiet guest in the corner room. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Mary knocked on my door, her voice perfectly polite. "Margaret, could you join us in the dining room? We'd like to talk." I followed her, my face calm, my pulse steady. Harris had prepared me for this moment, but walking into that room still sent a quiet tremor through me. David was already seated at the head of the table, papers stacked neatly in front of him. Mary sat to his right, her expression composed, her eyes cool. "Mom," David began, his voice soft, "we've been thinking about what's best for everyone. We know you've been comfortable here, but maybe it's time to consider other arrangements, somewhere that's more suited to you." Mary smiled faintly. "A retirement community would be perfect. You'd have friends your age, activities. We could help you find one. Of course, we'd make sure you're settled in before we move forward with our own plans." I sat down across from them, folding my hands in my lap. My expression gave nothing away. "Move forward with your plans?" I asked lightly. David cleared his throat. "We've been considering selling the house. It's just the right time for us financially." The words hung in the air. They expected me to protest, maybe even plead. Instead, I nodded slowly, as though digesting their reasoning. "I see," I said quietly. "And you'd like me to leave?" Mary's eyes flickered. "We just think it's the best decision for everyone. You deserve your own space, your own independence." I smiled faintly. "Independence," I repeated as if tasting the word. There was a pause. They were waiting for me to agree, to say I understood. The silence stretched, weighted and deliberate. Then I leaned back in my chair. "I think I'll follow my lawyer's advice." Mary's smile faltered just slightly. David frowned. "Your lawyer?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a crisp envelope, setting it gently on the table. The seal of Harris's law office gleamed in the light. "This," I said softly, "should make things clearer." Mary's hand hesitated halfway toward the envelope before David took it. He opened it, scanning the letter, his expression tightening with each line. "What is this?" Mary's voice was sharper now. "It's a formal statement from my attorney," I said calmly, "affirming my legal co-ownership of this property. And," I tapped the second page still inside the envelope, "documenting the existence of a forged signature filed with the bank." Mary went pale. David's jaw tightened. I could hear the sound of Harris's voice in my memory. "Stay calm. Let the facts do the work." David set the papers down slowly. "Mom, this isn't—" Before he could finish, Harris's voice came from the doorway. "It's exactly what it looks like, David." They both turned, stunned. Harris stepped into the room, his briefcase in hand. "I thought it best to deliver this in person," he said smoothly, "given the gravity of the situation." Mary stood abruptly. "You can't just walk in here." "Actually," Harris interrupted, his tone firm, "I can. As Margaret's legal representative, I'm here to inform you both that any attempt to sell or transfer this property without her explicit, notarized consent is illegal. And the forged document you submitted to the bank, that's fraud, A criminal offense. The room went utterly still. David's face was tight with shock, his usual composure fraying. "Mary?" he began, his voice uncertain. Mary shook her head quickly, her voice brittle. I don't know what you're talking about." Harris set another envelope on the table. Bank correspondence, copies of the forged document, and handwriting analysis that confirms the signature is not Margaret's. Mary's shoulders stiffened. David looked between us, his voice quieter now. "Mom, why didn't you say anything sooner?" I met his eyes. "Because I wanted to hear what you'd say first." His gaze dropped. Mary sank back into her chair, her face pale. "So, what happens now?" Harris's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Now? You stop any action involving this property. You acknowledge Margaret's legal standing as co-owner, and you understand that if another attempt like this is made, the authorities will be notified." David nodded slowly. Mary said nothing. I stood, smoothing my sweater. "I'll give you some time to think about what Harris just said. I imagine you have a lot to discuss." Without another word, I walked out of the room, Harris following me. Behind me, the silence in the dining room was deafening. For the first time since I'd moved in, I felt the balance shift. The days following Harris's visit were oddly quiet. There were no more closed-door conversations in David's office, no whispered phone calls that fell silent when I walked into the room. Mary moved through the house with measured politeness, her words careful, her voice steady. David, for his part, kept his head down. When we crossed paths, he spoke in a softer tone, almost cautious. He no longer avoided my gaze. It wasn't a sudden transformation into warmth and affection. That would have been unrealistic, but there was a change. Boundaries had shifted. At dinner a few nights later, Mary asked if I'd like to sit at the head of the table. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. "Thank you," I said, taking my usual seat anyway. "Here is fine." There was no tension in the air, just a quiet understanding. Over the next few weeks, David approached me about the house. "We want to make sure you're comfortable, Mom," he said one evening. "If there's anything you need changed about your room, or if you'd prefer a different space..." It wasn't an offer to give me the master bedroom, but it was recognition. Acknowledgement that I wasn't just an afterthought in the house. "I appreciate that," I said. "I'm fine where I am, but I will make a few changes to the space, just to make it feel more like mine." Mary nodded without protest. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it was stability. And stability, after months of quiet battles, felt like a victory. With Harris's guidance, I filed documents reaffirming my co-ownership, making it clear that any decisions about the property required my consent. There were no more surprises, no more forged signatures. Ethan noticed the shift too. He started spending more time in my room again, curled up on the little couch, reading or telling me about school. He didn't know the details, and I didn't tell him. Children shouldn't carry the weight of adult conflicts, but he felt the difference. And so did I. Looking back, it wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my place. Not as a guest, not as someone just passing through, but as someone who mattered. Weeks later, on a quiet Saturday morning, I sat on the back porch with my coffee. The air was cool, the sky pale with the promise of spring. Harris had stopped by the day before to drop off the finalized paperwork, everything neat and secure. "You played it perfectly," he'd said. "Sometimes the smartest move is to let people show you who they are before you make your move." I thought about that now, sipping my coffee. David stepped out onto the porch, his hands in his pockets. "Morning, Mom," he said. "Morning," I replied. He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry about everything. I should have spoken up sooner." I met his eyes, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who once climbed a tree to rescue a kitten. The boy who used to beg for my strawberry cake every birthday. "We move forward," I said simply. He nodded, relief in his face. Mary never apologized directly, but she was different now, less guarded, more deliberate in including me in conversations. Whether it was out of genuine respect or careful self-preservation didn't matter. The result was the same. I was no longer invisible. And as for me, I learned something important. I'd spent months thinking my voice didn't matter, that keeping the peace meant staying quiet. But sometimes, silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. I didn't need to shout, to slam doors, or to wage a war in the open. All it took was one well-placed truth, delivered at the right moment to turn everything around. Life settled into a new rhythm. I had my space, my boundaries, and my dignity intact. The house wasn't just theirs anymore. It was ours, in the way it was always meant to be. And for the first time since I'd moved in, I felt at home. I'll tell you this, if you ever find yourself feeling small in a place you helped build, remember, your value doesn't disappear just because others stop seeing it. Protect what's yours, know your rights, and don't be afraid to hold your ground quietly until the moment comes to stand. Because sometimes, one calm sentence backed by truth can be louder than 1,000 arguments.